homeschooling isn't always picture perfect. Welcome to Homeschooling with Dr. B, where we'll help you find solutions to the challenges you face and celebrate your successes with you. Now, please welcome your host, Dr. B.
Welcome, my tenacious homeschool tribe. Today, we're going to be talking about allowing our kids to fail. It's a good thing, I tell you. It's a really good thing. Recently, I have been reading a lot of articles in psychology journals, sociology journals, medical journals, and all kinds of journals, and even a few magazines that talk about the fact that happy children may not lead to competent or self-sufficient adults. Now, what a shocker that was, right? It turns out that the more we rescue our children from their mistakes, their bad experiences, instead of really making them happy, we're making them feel helpless. Additionally, it creates a real false sense of entitlement. And this made me think of a time when I was teaching Intro to Sociology, and a student came in and wanted to talk to me. And I said, "Sure, how can I help you?" And she hands me her paper and she says, "I'm an A student." And I look at the paper and I'm like, "But you earned a C on that paper." And frankly, I was being generous when I gave her that C. And she said to me, "But I'm an A student. An A student doesn't get a C on a paper. You gave me a C." And I said, "I didn't give you a C. You earned a C." And again, she said, "But I'm an A student," which frankly doesn't mean anything anymore. Grades are so overinflated anyhow. But the bottom line is, she felt she deserved that A. She was entitled to it. Why? I have no idea. Up until the point where her parents showed up in my office to discuss their college students' grade, which, by the way, the university did not allow me to do that. I couldn't discuss those issues with the parents. In order for me to do that, the student had to go to the office and sign a waiver, and then it had to be approved by the dean of students, and they had to come back to me with that signed waiver so that I could speak to their parents. And to be honest with you, in all the years that I taught, nobody was interested in doing that. Now, to be honest with you, I really tried to teach my children to be problem solvers. But even so, when they hit the teen years, especially in middle school, I made the mistake of becoming involved in some of their discussions or their arguments with their friends. And I soon realized it was fruitless. You intervene, you try to fix the problem, and the kids become friends. The parents are no longer talking to each other. It is just a cycle. Kids get in fights, then they solve their issue, they move on to their next issue. Not much of a rescuer. Nowadays, I interview so rarely, unless there's a threat of physical harm or it's impacting their mental health. I really try very, very hard not to be involved in their teen drama. However, my kids do still experience some anxiety. My ADHD child has anxiety because it's a comorbidity of ADHD. ADHD usually is connected to anxiety, OCD, or Tourette's, and she definitely has some of those comorbidities. My other child is anaphylactic to tree nuts, which means if she consumes tree nuts, she could be dead within a few minutes. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think anaphylaxis is the same thing as having an allergy and it's not a big deal. And that has led to a lot of anxiety on her part. Then in turn, she projects onto her studies because she can't just leave it in one area of her life, like many of us. So just recently, she was extremely anxious because she took an online quiz and she came to the realization she was not as good in Spanish as she thought she was. Now, I knew that she was not that good. She didn't realize it. And this gave her massive anxiety because now she's going into high school and she wants to take the advanced placement test for Spanish. Do I rescue her from the bad grade? No, I don't. I do help her with her anxieties, though. And that brings me to something that's has been on the news a lot lately. Simone Biles, the gymnast, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, pulled out of the Olympics team final. She said it was because she was suffering from massive anxiety. Her head was not in the right place. As someone who comes from an abusive childhood, who suffers from extreme anxiety, I understand what you say. You do have panic attacks or moments when your anxiety becomes overwhelming. But I thought also of the articles I had read, and I really had to ask myself, was this a good thing she did? She pulled out to ensure her mental health, to make sure that she could handle the situation moving forward. Or did she pull out because her first vault went wrong and that caused her to stress out and she was not ready to cope with the challenge of failure? It was easier for her to pull out than it was to stay in and do her best. And her best not being perfect. I really thought back to an interview that I had seen of Nancy Kerrigan and her family, in which the family talked about the numerous sacrifices her parents had made. Okay? Her dad had taken 2 jobs. He was working around the clock. Her siblings didn't get to do a lot of the things that their friends were doing because all of the money went to Nancy. And I thought of the hundreds of thousands of dollars that went into Simone's training. Now, some of the people on the diverse social media out there said, if it were my child, the money wouldn't matter. And my heart just shrunk a little there because if it were my child, it would have mattered. I love my children. I love my children unconditionally, but resources are finite. It means there's a limited amount of resources. And if my child couldn't face the anxiety that comes with being on such a competitive sport, I wouldn't be paying for their training. I would be paying for something else, like their college education or their siblings' other interest. And I also thought it was unfair to the person that could have gone in Simone's place. How does that person feel? Now, somebody said to me, well, Simone earned her place in the Olympic team. And at that point, I didn't respond anymore because I realized we weren't going to come to an agreement. We had to agree to disagree. But the way that I looked at that specific issue was Simone didn't earn the right to be in the Olympic team. She earned the right to participate with the Olympic team. And if she wasn't going to participate, she shouldn't have been there. If her anxiety was that bad for her own mental health, perhaps she should have made a different choice. More importantly, courage means facing your fears or doing the difficult thing despite your anxiety, your fear, your desire to give up, not to look like a fool, to not face your challenge. Now, perhaps I'm being too hard on Simone. And no doubt this has a lot to do with the fact that I have a hard time relating to her choice. I'm the daughter of immigrants. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I had to fight hard to get myself healthy after a childhood of abuse. I had to experience the loss of several homes. I know what it's like to have money, and at the same time, I know what it's like to live in a house that has a dirt floor, wondering where your next meal is going to come from. I've had to endure a lot of physical pain due to a series of illnesses. And becoming a mother was extraordinarily challenging for me. If you've ever checked out my other blog, Older Moms, you hear some of my stories. I come from a very challenging childhood. So, as I said, perhaps I am being too hard on her. But that really left me thinking about my children. Left me thinking about my children, not just because of Simone's choice, not just because of the articles that I was reading, but because I really want to teach them to be more resilient. And definitely, one of the benefits of homeschooling is that you're not dealing just with the education, you're dealing, or at least I'm taking a holistic approach. I want my children to learn more than book knowledge. I want them to be good people. I want them to be independent thinkers. And now I've added to my list of desires that they become resilient adults. And what I realize is that I really have to begin emphasizing that no one is born knowing everything. One of my daughters has a lot of problems with that idea. And that's something that's relatively recent. It really started happening last year, where she's terrified of not getting a good grade. She's terrified of making a fool out of herself. And I'm hoping that this is just part of the beginning of the teen years and this will wear itself out or work itself out. But one of the things that I'm going to be stressing with my homeschoolers is that failure should not be feared. Failure teaches us what we need to learn. It teaches us what we're great at, what we're good at, what we're not good at. It allows us to study in those areas that we need help in, or learn or search so that we become better in a specific area. It also gives our children ownership over their actions in their future, because if you're constantly rescuing them, they never learn from their failures, their mistakes. There's nothing wrong with the word. And I mean, so often I hear from parents, you can't say that a kid failed. It's horrible. We all fail in some way or another. That's not important. What's important is our ability to get up and do our best. Do our best. One of the things that I've been really stressing to my children is that the master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried. You need to be confident to fail. You need to believe in yourself. You need to be comfortable in your own skin to fail. And failure teaches us good things, like humility, okay? One of my biggest fears is the idea that I could fail as a mother. And there have definitely been times when I've made mistakes. And I've apologized to my kids because I want them to learn from example. I failed. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. And it also taught me a lot of humility, not just because I apologized to my children who are younger and less mature and experienced than I am, but because it forced me to understand that sometimes I have to ask for help. I have to ask another mother for help. I have to ask a mom how they handle a specific teen problem, or if I'm struggling with something in the homeschool arena, I have to ask a mother that has more experience how I can meet that challenge. It's also taught me compassion. So while I don't relate to Simone's decision not to continue to participate with the Olympic team, I also understand that I don't share her experience. I feel for her because while we may be coming from completely different worlds, I know what anxiety can do. I suffer it every day. And I know what it's like to get a panic attack and feel paralyzed. Or when that anxiety gets into your head and completely skews your perspective. And you think you can't possibly do what you need to do. And I feel bad for her in that sense. I feel really bad. And I hope that if she one day feels that she made the wrong decision, that she goes easy on herself, that she realizes that we make the best decision that we can make at that moment. And honestly, it doesn't matter what other people think. It only matters what we think of our decision because we're the ones that have to live with the consequences of our choices. Definitely one of the things that we focus on as a homeschooling family is problem solving as a very important skill. So when we're faced with a challenge, how are we going to deal with it? And we've learned a lot of creative ways of managing a problem. One day, one of my kids came in and one of her friends had tied her up and had kind of dragged her around. And she had the bruising on her arms, and I was extremely upset. And I said to my other child, "Why didn't you intervene on behalf of your sister?" And she said, "I did. I wasn't sure I could take on our friend. So I was pretending that I was helping her, but I was untying my sister and I was helping her up." And I looked at her. I was like, "What?" But then I realized she took a different approach, but it was a good outcome. She helped her sister get out of that mess. She helped her sister get up. So creativity. When it comes to homeschooling, my ADHD child for a while struggled with reading at a good pace. So I would get the audible version of the book and she could listen to it and read it as she went. And eventually she was reading faster than Audible could read to her. So she was done with Audible. Adaptability is another thing. We need to adapt when we're faced with challenges. I was telling my daughter that one of the ways that I deal with my anxiety when it gets out of control and I start obsessing on something is I start singing in my head, "Let It Go." Now it sounds totally stupid, right? And I hate to get the song in my head because then once I get it in, I can't get it out. But it reminds me not to let my anxiety get the best of me. And it sets me on a healthier loop. So my daughter said, "Well, do you think that would work for me?" I said, "I don't know. Try it." But I also got her some pop sockets and this little like pea pod that you squish. So to take out your anxiety. And so far things have been working out, right? And in the meantime, she's working with a psychologist to deal with her anxiety. Determination. Determination is very important. You decide to do something and you do it. I can't tell you the number of times the determination made all the difference in my life. For example, my determination to teach my ADHD child. She didn't have to adapt. I had to adapt. And I had to get creative about the way that I taught her. I had to learn to reach her in a way that she understood. And now I find myself with an extremely creative and determined child who has to learn to adapt, to compromise. But that's a wonderful challenge to have, right? And I still have a few years left with them. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to have to let you know. What I do know is that whether or not I relate to Simone, whether or not I relate to this generation's perspective, I want to help my kiddos feel unthreatened by failure. I want them to be resilient. I want them to be unafraid. I think that's really important because kids who can redirect and stay engaged in tasks, even difficult tasks, are less dependent or codependent on others. They're more organized, more focused, and are able to fulfill their goals and their dreams. That's important to me because I want them to be self-sufficient in this life, which I think is the best way to enter a relationship, not from a codependent need, but from two dependent people choosing to be dependent on each other. Yay for interdependence. So don't be afraid to give your kiddo a bad grade if they earned it. Let them have the grade and talk to them about how to improve it. Don't just let them have it and say, okay, here you go. You did terrible. I'm disappointed in you. Nope, nothing like that. If my child doesn't get a good grade, we sit down. Okay, what happened? What challenges did you face? Why did you think you got this grade? What can we do to improve it? Because I'm there to be supportive. I'm there to help them achieve their dreams. And education is part of that. Let's conclude our episode by thanking our sponsors at Hide Your Feet, the insole that massages your feet with every step. Use the code OMB 15% off for an additional 15% off at hideyourfeet.com. These are great for my kids. My daughter's a dancer and her feet get really tired after dance classes. She puts these in and the squishy stuff massages her feet as it goes from the front to the back to the front. These are great. Just absolutely love them. I know life can be overwhelming, but homeschooling doesn't have to be. Remember, we just recently started a homeschooling group on Facebook. Check us out by searching for Homeschooling with Dr. B. For links and resources, please visit our website. Till next week, enjoy your kiddos.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Homeschooling with Dr. B. Head over to homeschoolingwithdrb.com for more information and resources. That's homeschoolingwithdrb.com. Until next time.